changes. There are no changes they've told me that we could make that would cause them to support the bill. So they're really just looking at ways of opposing it many times over.
Well, there you have it. House Leader Peter Van Loan accusing the opposition parties of exploiting parliamentary procedure to both obstruct and delay the budget implementation bill. Now, with a majority in the House of Commons, the government has the numbers to pass its legislation. So what can these hundreds of amendments and potential marathon votes actually accomplish other than to drag out the inevitable? Is this an exercise in democracy or political gimmickry? Joining me now from Vancouver is the NDP's Deputy Leader, Libby Davies, and from Montreal, Liberal House Leader Marc Garneau.
Hi,
welcome
Chris.
to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let me start with you, Libby. You heard Peter Van Loan basically saying that you're not interested actually in changes. You're just interested in killing the bill. Is that what you're after?
Well, I think we're very interested to consult with Canadians, to hear what Canadians have to say. The fact is the Conservative government hasn't listened to Canadians. They haven't consulted. They haven't showed any notion of compromising. And I think all of the amendments that we have to this bill are a reflection of the growing opposition that there is to Bill C-38. You know, we've spent many, many hours in committee looking at the bill. We did want to have the bill split at the very earliest stages. The NDP negotiated with the government and tried to find ways to split the bill, but of course they had no interest in doing that.
Let me just pick up on this.
It's not about gimmicks, I can tell you.
Okay,
it is about due process and examining legislation and trying to amend this very offensive piece of legislation.
Yeah, I want to pick up so people understand fully. At committee, you did try to amend it. You did try to have the bill split. What you and the Liberals are proposing now is actually simply deleting measures in the bill. So I know it's not, in fairness, from your point of view, I know you don't think it's gimmickry, but in a sense, it really is just trying to delay the bill, is it not?
No, it is about dealing with a proper process. You know, at report stage in the House of Commons on any piece of legislation, members have the ability to put forward amendments. So we're using the due process that's there in the House. And I find it really just quite appalling that now when any party tries to actually avail themselves of tools and vehicles that are within the House, that somehow it just becomes, obstruction. Of course, we have time allocation on just about every piece of legislation. So there are so many levels, Chris, to oppose this legislation. On the process itself, the fact that they have been absolutely refusing to show any idea of compromising, listening to Canadians. I mean, there's so many things in this bill, whether it's EI or pensions or health care or the environmental changes. My God, I mean, this is what we've come to. So yes, we're going to put up a fight because that's what Canadians want us to do. And there's growing opposition to this bill, and we're going to use everything we can to put pressure on the government to make sure that Canadians are heard.
All right, let me bring Marc Garneau on this. You also have quite a large number of deletions that you're seeking to have. What is your hope here with this process?
Well, as you know, Chris, this bill will have profound implications on the lives of Canadians with respect to the environment, the Fisheries Act, old age security, immigration, you name it. So what can an opposition party do? We can draw attention to Canadians that the government is trying to do some things that it should not be doing in a democratic country. So we make as much noise as possible, and that's what we've been trying to do for the past few weeks. I believe that Canadians are beginning to realize it, but this is a majority government, as you pointed out, and so if the government doesn't withdraw the bill, as it did with Bill C-30, which was looking at internet traffic, and they realized there was such a public outcry that they pulled it back. That's what we're hoping ultimately will happen, or that the government will reason with us. But if they don't, we make a lot of noise with procedure, and that's what we're doing in this case.
Okay, the Speaker has, as you know, some power to decide whether to lump these together for votes, to let some go through and others not, because they might be talking about similar areas of the budget bill. In the end, if Canadians are watching this unfold, you've made your point about that there are some things in this budget you don't like. This is to both of you. What is a line here that can be drawn? If they withdraw the Fisheries Act, for example, I raised that with Peter Van Loan, would that satisfy either of you?
Well, I mean, I think, Chris, we would assess the situation as it unfolds. As you pointed out, the Speaker has to look at all of the amendments, and there's now hundreds and hundreds of them, and he has to group them. So we'll begin debate on those amendments and then eventually voting on them. But if the government did show some sign that they're willing to pull back, I mean, so far they haven't showed any iota of being willing to listen to people, Canadians I'm talking about, or show any compromise. So if that happens at this stage, because now there's mounting pressure on the Conservative government, then of course we would have a discussion about that. Because at the end of the day, we want to minimize the harm that this bill creates in so many parts of people's lives.
How about you, Marc?
And we would like
we've
to
got
see
maybe
them,
a week or so to do that.
We would like to see them break this act up into several pieces of legislation. Old age security. The government says, oh, we have to protect the fragile economy. Old age security doesn't kick in the change to the age for receiving it for another 11 years. This is hardly a pressing matter. The Fisheries Act, surely the government is smart enough to deal with the concerns with farmers' fields and not throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. What about EIs? EI is a major, major issue. There's 5 provinces now that have said, you can't go ahead and do this without consulting us. These are very, very important changes to what is our country today, and this government is just sort of barging ahead like a steamroller, and what we're trying to do is get them to stand back and break this bill up into separate parts, which we can then debate properly. We recognize that they're a majority, but let's do things properly.
So how are you both preparing this from a personal side? If you have overnight sittings now, starting maybe next week early, throughout, how do you prepare for something like that? Libby?
Well, we have a very strong caucus. If you remember, their first experience in Parliament was debating over many, many hours the back-to-work legislation for postal workers. So we have a very strong caucus. We're prepared to take this bill on. We already have our shifts assigned, and we know that we're going to be there long hours. But, you know, I think that's inconsequential. What we're really focused on is making it clear that this bill's got to be stopped. We've been calling for the bill to be split up. We've got to get the government to back off and to realize that this bill is so significant in terms of its heavy-handed approach, whether it's environment, pensions, healthcare, veterans. It goes on and on. We could debate it forever.
There are obviously issues dividing your party and the other.
But pressure does count. I do believe that pressure counts, and that we still have a shot at doing this.
Okay, Marc?
Yeah, and we met last Wednesday, and of course we're going to wait to see on Monday how many votes there will actually be, and depending on whether there's 100 or 200 or 300, we've got shifts assigned, but we're ready for it, and everybody is pumped up about this.
Okay, one last question for you, Marc, before we go. The Liberal executive announcing rules for the party leadership next week. Will you be throwing your hat into the leadership ring?
It's something I'm seriously considering, Chris, and I'll wait to see what those rules are, and then one morning I'll wake up and I'll have made my decision.
Another marathon for you. Okay. Thanks. Libby Davies and Marc Garneau.
Thank you.